Hi, I'm Haley Huey. I'm here with Startup Stories, and I am so excited today to interview a good friend and amazing founder, Gabe Gonzalez. Gabe, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about yourself and your company.
Uh, well, first, thank you for having me. This is home for me, NC State. It's alma mater, but more than that, I'm sure we'll get into it. Uh, Place of home, work, and a lot more. I'm an immigrant from Venezuela. I came to North Carolina actually when I was 17 in 2012. And I like to joke with friends because as I was growing up in Venezuela, my friends would go to Disney World and I would go to Smithfield, North Carolina. And the reason that happened was because I had an aunt who had left the country uh, earlier than most of us in 1998, and she ended up in Smithfield. So as we were growing up and we could travel certain places, it would always be around North Carolina, which ended up making my brother, my sister, myself, my parents like very become acquainted with Raleigh. So in 2012, as many may know, in the middle of the biggest social and economic implosion in the history of Latin America, I would call it, in Venezuela, I had the opportunity to come and study abroad, and Raleigh was the place that I picked. Um, and my brother and I, he actually came first, went first to Wade Tech, and then we ended up coming to NC State.
And the rest is history.
The rest is history. I think there's a couple moving pieces there, and I'll fast forward to where I am now, which is I'm the co-founder at Casalu, a brand built to pay homage to modern Latino culture, and our flagship product is our rum-based hard seltzer, and we are incorporated in North Carolina, based out of Miami. Most people don't know that. So,
Excellent.
yeah.
And Casalu, delicious product. Obviously, it's grown over time, and I know we'll talk much more about that. But what I find so interesting about that story, too, is you've landed here in North Carolina, which we love to call home, but may not be the entry point as we think about it for people coming to the US.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're doing that, you're also learning or leveling up your English. You're also learning
Yeah.
business. You're learning about how the world works at such a young age. What was that whole transition like for you? And how did you know that this was going to be home?
Look, it was tricky. It was a combination of things. So I come to Raleigh, and I first come to State to a program to learn English. And when I'm there, a couple things really happen. First, I meet my group of friends. I think Latinos have a way to gravitate towards each other. But I was lucky that, the first 2 years were like that. And then I came to a class at NC State, and it was an intro to entrepreneurship. It was the middle of the semester, a little bit earlier. And then this guy comes into the class and says, hey, I'm willing to talk to anybody about entrepreneurship or life. It could be over a coffee at 6 a.m. or a beer at 10 p.m. My reaction was like, Americans do this? And then this guy's name happened to be Louis Sheets, and he was a big part of NC State entrepreneurship at that time. And he was starting what's called the Entrepreneurship Clinic, which is a model where students could basically get embedded to execute on projects with real life startups. And at that point in time, I was still early, like I was still not ready to take those classes because I was just taking intro. But then I pushed him really hard on, could I be a volunteer? So he opened a volunteer sort of position for as a student. Like I was not getting credits, but I could see older students execute on their projects.
Yep.
And I hadn't picked my major yet at that point. And I meet him at the clinic, and I tell him, hey, I really think I want to do entrepreneurship, but everybody tells me not to. Like, what are you going to learn there that you're not going to learn in real life? Like, why would you take entrepreneurship classes? And he hears that, and I remember this, he tells me, I'm biased, so I'm obviously going to tell you to do it, but I'm not because I don't want to be the one making you make the decision. And then behind me was a kid who ended up becoming one of my best friends, and his wife is actually the designer behind all the Casalu cans. And he turns around and he says, hey, I picked marketing. I wouldn't think twice about picking entrepreneurship. You should do that.
That's
and
awesome.
I was like, okay, that's what I'm doing. All I needed was a stranger,
Decision made.
stranger randomly in a place that I had never been to tell me to do a decision. And he kind of pushed me over that ledge. So I'm very thankful for Jared. His name is Jared Childs. And that's how I got into entrepreneurship at State. And from that, it really became just a community, slowly getting exposed to people doing amazing things. I remember our neighbor at the time to the clinic happened to be these 5 guys who were building a data analytics-oriented startup that I never understood. It happens to be Pendo now. And I just got exposed to that over and over and over again. And the community is really what's allowed for Casalu to exist these days.
Yeah. So what I hear out of that story too is you've landed here, you've challenged yourself, obviously. You know, I think a lot of people might have taken easier paths. They might not have shown up to jump in the deep end.
Yeah.
But you are also building this amazing founder network. And sometimes that positive peer pressure can also challenge you in really helpful ways. So, Gabe, how did you know that Casalu was really what you wanted to stick with? This was your opportunity.
Look, when Casalu came along, I fast forward, I graduated in 2016. Casalu comes along really in the early days in 2020. So the reason it starts is a convergence of things. 2 things were and are still happening. The first one is our generation fundamentally decided that their first beer is no longer a beer, it's a White Claw.
Yeah.
And
what a helpful wave to be able to ride also, right? Convergence of timing and idea and all of those things.
And that's what it is, right? Like it's an adoption of a different type of product in the same moment of consumption. So you're drinking these things or consuming them lower alcohol, lighter, low carb. It was a health really craze that happened. It would happen during the pandemic strongly. And my co-founder, Ricardo, he never liked beer, which he would get bullied accordingly in college for. But he did really like rum. And during the pandemic, he saw High Noon, vodka, soda. And he said, why isn't there one made with rum, which is what most countries in Latin America like us drink, which we learned that in college. Like before that, we would have never known. We would have thought it's just a Venezuelan thing until we saw everywhere between Venezuela and Guatemala drinking rum. That was very similar to ours. And he said, he said like, hey, there's not one made for Latinos. He used to be called the gringo by the group because he's white. Not in a bad way. It's from love. And he said, like, if my friends see me drinking a White Claw, they're really gonna be like, we lost this guy.
Too far.
So he started making it at home, and then I came one summer. He was in Atlanta, and I tried it, and I didn't think much of it. I had it. It was good, but that was about it. But then that attaches to the other, more important to me, wave that was forming at the same time, which is Latino culture today, to us, is where Black culture was when we were kids. We were deeply influenced by hip-hop, the NBA, big rappers, and globally, right? If you look at brands from clothing and apparel to drinks, they were really influenced by Black culture taking control of their narrative. And now we were seeing kids in New York at a bar mitzvah singing to Bad Bunny. Top stream artist in the world for 3 years in a row. Last year he had the top most listened album globally which he released 2 years before. It makes no sense. Like
Yeah.
the numbers and the impact is just massive. And it really does make sense. 25% of Gen Z in the US is Latino.
Yeah.
Most of them were born here. Like that's a deep part of American culture now. So for us was like, and the reflection I did with Ricardo was, why isn't there really a brand built for this new generation of Latinos?
Yep.
Everything we saw was very much corporate trying to talk to them versus a brand built by them.
Yep.
So I came back to him, and I remember I made a mock-up of a website that I called Tropicalation at that time, and it was just cans with a very crappy design, and I just sent it to him, and mostly to generate some kind of reaction and say, maybe we should really start doing something. And that's really when we connected about starting Casalu.
Yeah. Well, I love that story too, and just kind of the empowerment of like we can own our own narrative, not translate it for other
Right.
people or have like a token product. I remember early days with Casalu where definitely you start with a rough prototype a lot of times. There's this idea, maybe it's an ugly drawing or a mock-up or whatever. I remember you with a soda stream, like pumping the soda stream, giving out samples so you
Yeah.
could get really good feedback. And honestly, it takes a lot of that, right? Like listen to people, try it out. It doesn't go from an idea that you have into something that's being packed and shipped right away. So what did you learn through that process that you think is still really important in Casalu today?
I think exactly what you just said is, how do you stay close enough to your audience, right?
Yeah.
So in the beginning, we were creating the mix out of our kitchen.
Yeah.
Ricardo came up with it in a soda stream, and that's really, we were making small size samples
Yep.
for people to try, and we would see their reaction. And we were lucky enough that we applied and got into the startup accelerator at NC State at Andrews, which at that time I had been managing, so I had to kind of remove myself from that.
Yeah.
Obviously, decision making but the validation that we got from seeing real, not only founders but investors, look at what we were working on and say, we really think there might be something here, was very special. So we got $5,000 of non-dilutive funding to go from that soda stream to a keg.
Yep.
Because if you think about it, everybody who was in our group, in our cohort, had some kind of prototype, paying customers. It was tech moves at different speed.
Yeah.
For us was, okay, how can we get validation from real customers? So what we did was, okay, let's go, put it in a keg, let's go to Miami, move there for a month, pay for an Airbnb, because it's the rum capital of the world. If Miami was a country, it would be the 6th top consumer of rum in the world.
Wow.
Which is insane.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And is Latino capital of the U.S. by density.
Yep.
65% of population in terms of density is Latino. And if there's some place where we can get some real feedback, because that has to be our initial customer, it has to be there. So we rented an Airbnb behind an Airbnb. It was a tiny house. The company had been started by 3 of us, so Ricardo, Gustavo, and I, and the 3 of us were sleeping horizontally on a bed for a month.
Yeah.
Crashing parties really coming in with our CO2 tank and our keg and be like, hey, you got to try this. And people would be like, who the heck are you and who invited you? Listen, just try it, give us feedback. And we always stayed at the events or the parties or whatever it was. Yeah. And that's how we started using some of that customer feedback. Hey, it has too much lemon. You should put more rum. Like, it should be here or there. And that really helped us kind of keep tweaking the product.
Yeah.
And we obviously got COVID. This is 2021. Miami obviously got COVID. And while we were there, Ricardo and I are like completely feeling terrible. We had created a mock-up website where you could order, which is, you can't. First, we had no cans. Second, we had no production. Third, pretty sure it's illegal. Or was, or slightly. Not in a terrible way. And we see an order come through, and we're like, that's crazy. Who is this? And then we look at the website, and it says Brian from BFG Partners. And that happens to be one of the biggest consumer venture funds in the US. And I'm like, oh my God, what did we do? And I call up the guy, start calling, and he picks up. He's in like a partner meeting. He's like, hey, what's up? And I'm like, hey, I'm Gabe from Casalu. I saw you put in an order. Like, this doesn't really exist yet. What brought you here? And he's like, oh, cool that you were doing some validation. Makes sense. I've been looking at the space for a while. I just saw it in this newsletter, which happened to be, it's called Snackshot. It's a CPG trend finder platform. Amazing. Andrea Hernandez is the name of the founder of that platform, and everybody should check it out. She found us when we were still in the keg at a boat party.
Wow.
We still, till this day, we don't know how that happened. And that's how we said, okay, there's something here. We obviously can't go anywhere with $5,000 or $10,000. We're going to have to raise capital.
You've kind of reached this pivotal moment in your brand, and there are some really good signs that people like what you're doing, but also maybe some pressing decisions to say, okay, we need to get this out there. We need to think about what scale might look like. Yeah. What did that look like for you guys way back then? And then bring us up to date. What does that look like for you guys now?
Yeah. Well, at that time, we didn't know. At the time, it was about everybody had fundamentally full-time jobs. Yeah. And that was when it became real. Yep. So the journey accelerated pretty fast afterwards. I came back to Raleigh and talked to a potential investor, one of, like I said, the mentors from the program. I didn't approach him for capital need. It was really for advice. And I'll always tell people, ask for money, get advice. Ask for advice, get money. And it ended up opening the doors to the realization also from a potential investor of saying, okay, if you put this in front of this audience that you're talking about, then you'll sell like a zillion cans. And I told him that's exactly what I'm telling you. Yeah. So then he basically did pretty much all the work and to help us raise capital from 3 of the board members at Caesars Entertainment, who are the financial backers of Casalu. And it unleashed a path of reality. So I told you before that it was the right time, the right place.
Unleash a path to reality. I love that.
Yeah. The right place at the right time, right? So we said, okay, raise capital. I still wasn't, technically like, and I wasn't operating the business at the time. I got a permit actually to work and be able to leave my job at that moment, which was at NC State, to start Casalu. So it was all like coincidence of the timing. And we moved to Miami, launched the business there. And scale at that time, it really only meant validate this in the market. Yeah. And it's a very tough market. CPG is extremely hard. And then you add CPG plus alcohol. Yeah. It becomes very, very tough.
And just to underline one more time, you did not come from like a liquor empire background.
Nothing.
You did not have an unfair advantage in this CPG marketplace.
At all.
Yeah.
Our unfair advantage that we're starting to see, and I think we should maybe get into that in a second, it was simply our ability to see culture ahead of time and to be able to prove that. But it took us a while. And you can't really build a brand just on being right on what's going to happen in culture. Yep. Because we needed to really have the right product and the right scaffolding around that product for people to adopt it. We made all the mistakes in the book because of that same reason. And when I look back at it, I think if I had to change one thing, would have just been trust yourself more. So we started to hire these consultants and agencies and people who had been in that alcohol industry in the past, all to realize that in order to win, we had to do it differently.
Yeah.
And so a lot of our capital was used for that over a period of time. But luckily, it started with us hitting the streets, then the pavement in Miami, knocking on doors, trying to sell our product. At that point in time, we had created this thing for influencers and artists, which was a Discman, like back in the day. I went to a music studio of a friend, and we recorded an intro that explained what's Casalu, and then it would have the top 23 reggaeton songs that I consider the best in history from there up until now. Yeah. And we started sending that to people, and it was awesome. One of the people we sent it to was the owner of Total Wine, the biggest independent liquor chain in the country.
Yeah.
A week later, he sends an email and he says, let's meet. We go meet, and then the guy's wearing this thing. And he's like, I've been wearing this thing for my board meetings. This is crazy. I want to give you 3 stores that start with 3 cases. And then in 6 months, we went from that to 40 stores at 15 cases each. And cases is the measurement of success, really, in our industry. Case is 24 cans.
Okay.
So that was like, okay, we can get into places commercially. And then we picked up big distributor in Florida. It happens to be the same distributor as High Noon. For people who don't know High Noon is now the #1 selling spirit brand in the country. They sell more liquid than Tito's or Fireball.
I did not know that. Okay. I would have said Tito's for sure.
Yeah, they're above Tito's. They're above Fireball.
Okay, wow.
And that slowly started to also help us get in shape. A lot of struggles in between, hire people, fire people. But the snowball kept building. We launched a new flavor, and that really helped us take off. We were listening to the market, and they were like, we would like a sweeter complement to the dry lemon lime. Sure. And we did it, and that, really took off almost immediately overnight.
I'm a purist. I want to say the limon for me is perfection. So
yes.
I'll always be a purist.
I'm a limon guy too. And anyway, from that, it became pretty clear that we had something. And then we, last year, really we came to a tipping point, which was we got into all the Trader Joe's in Florida. We got into all the fresh markets in Florida. We have a pilot coming up with Walmart and Whole Foods.
That's huge. Oh my gosh, yeah. Congratulations.
So those are coming. And that from a commercial side, I think from the beginning it started for us in supporting culture from the beginning. We want to be a platform for them. I think the analogy we always made is if you look at Red Bull for some people might be an energy drink, for other people might be a Formula One team. Yeah. When we came up with the name Casalu, right before we launched the actual business, which means casa, it's our home, it's our heritage. Mm-hmm. Salud is how we pronounce cheers. Yeah. So it's an open door for everybody to enjoy our culture, because we really believe that Latinos for Latinos had already been done by beer very efficiently. Sure. And now we needed to be authentic to our culture, yet be able to translate and open it. And for us was, since the beginning, let's be in places where we think our culture should be showcased. So that meant all the way from underground parties to music videos to places where people really wanted this type of energy. And for us, it was a way to give back that narrative to key pillars in the culture. So for us, it's been a journey of putting those two things together. Yeah. And you asked, what does scale look like now? One of the things is very attached to industry. If you look at liquor, the phenomenon that's happened is because there was a switch from beer to these type of products. Now liquor players, liquor conglomerates around the world can play in the beer moment for the first time in history. Sure. And that means they can be in the coolers next to beer with a similar format without it having to be specifically a traditional beer. Liquor had never been able to do that, right? Bacardi would have never been next to beer.
Yeah,
Diageo,
totally.
All Par, Buchanan's, like all the liquor brands, tequila brands, whatever, like the owners of those brands could have never played next to beer. And what happens is they're chasing market share. So playing in that space, it becomes really attractive through acquisitions, through partnerships, through strategic alignments. So scale for us is keep building the brand in Florida and prove that we can get to 40,000 cases this year. It's our target. And who knows? I mean, it'll open the door to grow beyond, but for us, it was important to do what's known as going a mile deep, an inch wide, versus trying to sell in a lot of places and not being able to make a deep connection with the audience.
All right, Gabe, that's all the time we have today. This was so much fun. I wish we had many episodes. We could do a series on Casalu and all the exciting things that you're doing. But we're so excited for your success. It's always great to sit down and swap some stories. But thank you for being such an amazing part of our community.
Thank you for having me. Let's do the next ones over some Casalus for sure.
Yeah.